On Sunday, 14th of October, 1066, William the Conqueror defeated and killed the King of England, King Harold II, at the Battle of Hastings.
The sport begins! Tally-ho!
4 years later, in the year 1070, William, who has now become the King of England, invited a group of Jewish merchants to England from Rouen, 75 miles from Malay, where King William himself was born as a bastard around the year 1028. But there was a problem. The king had invited the Jewish merchants to England with the hope that their commercial skills and incoming capital would make England more prosperous. But when they arrived in England, they were not allowed to participate in trades or to own land.
Wo ist Ihr Versteck? Im Dachboden.
Instead, Jews in England were restricted to practicing medicine and money lending. Since Jews were restricted from doing most businesses, they decided to do the two things they were allowed to do very well. For example, Jews charged 33% annual interest on lands mortgaged by nobles and 300% on tools of trade. Within 2 generations, about 25% of all English lands were in the hands of Jewish usurers. In fact, by 1186, a Jewish man named Aaron of Lincoln was the richest man in the whole of England.
Aaron of Lincoln was quite possibly the wealthiest man in 12th century England, and that is including the kings of Scotland and the larger isles.
Today, the idea that Jewish are some of the most successful people in the world isn't a myth. For example, according to this Wikipedia article, Jews are only 0.19% of the world's population as of 2021. But 30% of the 100 wealthiest people in the world were Jews as of 2010. 5 out of 10 richest people in the world, that is 50% of the top 10 richest people, were Jews as of 2018. And 19% of the 200 richest people in the world were Jews as of 2018. Whether it's banking, comedy, medicine, law, or Nobel Prize, Jews dominate everywhere. But as you saw in my above story and more later in this video, for thousands of years, what Jews could do or even where they could live were always restricted. It then means that success doesn't go to people who have everything. Instead, people become successful because they maximize the few opportunities they have. The lesson here is simple. Start with what you have. Maximize the little opportunities that come your way, instead of waiting for the perfect time when you'll have so much more. Earlier in this video, I talked about how the King of England, William I, invited some Jews to his country in 1070. What I didn't tell you, however, is that the Jews later suffered massacres in England between the year 1189 and 1190. And were all expelled from England in the year 1290. There is a vivid biblical record of how Jews suffered as slaves for decades in Egypt before they ran away in the 13th century BCE. You can read about the 70 years of the Babylonian captivity as well as numerous other wars, enslavements, and massacres Jews had to suffer in the Bible. But if you don't believe in the Bible, I'll remind you of several other massacres of Jews since then. In 139 BC, the Jews who were not Romans were expelled by Pratios Hispanius. In the year 612, Visigothic king Sesbot mandated that every Jew who would refuse for over a year to have himself or his children and servants baptized would be banished from the country and deprived of his possessions. Jews were expelled from Austria in 1421. In the year 1394, France expelled all Jews. Hungary expelled Jews in 1349. Lithuania expelled Jews in 1495. Milan in 1597. Naples in 1510. And Portugal in 1497. What happens when an individual, a group of people, or a nation has to go through so many difficulties? Is that they'll either become the strongest of all people so they could survive, or they perish. You've heard it said before, difficult times birth strong men. Well, that's the case with the Jews. Because generations of Jews had to face so many difficulties, they resulted into seeking power and prosperity as a way to survive. For example, a few days ago I read in this book how for several generations Jewish parents have always told their children to become doctors, lawyers, or entrepreneurs, some of the most lucrative professions in the world. On page 53 of the book, Steven Silbiger told the story of a woman walking with two children. Someone asked her what their names were, and the woman said the doctor is 3 and the lawyer is 2. The entire chapter 3 of the Jewish phenomenon is about how Jews intentionally raise their children to pursue the most lucrative careers in the world. Seeking power and prosperity is a necessity for Jews, because if they are weak, they'll perish among so many enemies. In his 1974 book, Zion in America, the 20th century historian Henry L. Feingold wrote, "The Jewish worker was neither a son of a worker, nor would he produce a son who was a worker. Middle-class aspiration requires that he earn more. The lesson here is simple. Don't allow difficult times to destroy you. Instead, use your disadvantages as an inspiration to achieve success. For example, if you were born by poor parents, instead of complaining all your life because of that, use that disadvantage as an inspiration to become successful." In 2012, the two economists, Maristella Botticini and G. Extian, published The Chosen Few. In the book, Botticini and Extian trace the wealth of the Jews to the events that happened in the year 70 AD, during the First Jewish-Roman War. It happened that the Jews' temple was destroyed, and as a result, the responsibility of literacy, which largely lay on a few elites, suddenly fell on ordinary Jews. For the first time, the study of the written Torah, which was previously restricted to a small elite of rabbis and scholars, now became what many people must aspire to do. Because of this incident, education became the household aspiration of Jewish people, and that became a culture. Up till today, Judaism as a religion has the most educated people in the world. According to this 2016 study by Pew Center about religion and education around the world, Jews are the most educated religious group in the world, with an average of 13.4 years of schooling. Jews also have the highest number of post-secondary degrees per capita, which is 61%. If you compare that to other religion, you'll see something. For example, Christians have an average of 9 years of schooling, while Muslims and Hindus have an average of 5.6 years of schooling.
And the answer is that Jews have always had an extraordinarily high focus on education. So the literacy rate in the Jewish community back in ancient times is nearly 100% for men and women.
On page 111 of The Jews Phenomenon, Steven Silbiger wrote, "Jews are the cornerstone of hardcover book sales, accounting for between 50 to 70% of non-institutional hardcover sales in the U.S. Jews' desire to go to school and get degrees isn't only about school. It's about a culture that promotes curiosity and learning. For example, around the year 1092, a Christian monk, Gilbert Crispin, issued a disputation about his exchange with a Jew. According to Crispin's account, the Jew he encountered was so curious that he knew as much as about his religion as well as his opponent's religion. Crispin wrote, and I quote, "He was well versed even in our law and literature, and had a mind practiced in the scriptures and in disputes against us." The lesson here is simple. The more you learn, the more you earn. Read books, watch educational videos, read educational blog posts, and be curious. If you are curious, you'll come across ideas and insights most people can't come across, and that will help you to do what most people can't do. In November of 1995, Robert Dictionary of Synonyms was published in France. And guess what? In that dictionary, the synonym for the word Jews was written as miser. Of course, that led to an outrage among the Jews, but the idea that Jews are stingy went back to hundreds of years. For example, in 1600, Shakespeare published his play, The Merchant of Venus, in which Shylock, a Jewish moneylender, was portrayed as being stingy. But there is a problem. Most people who assume that Jews are stingy probably came to that conclusion because they don't see Jews wasting money like everyone else. Most people all over the world are dumb when it comes to growing money. Just a few days ago, one of my friends asked me to lend him money to buy a luxurious car. I know people who use their entire 1-month income to buy a phone. People in our world want a good life, and they want it now. If you want to be rich, you must know how to delay gratification. Oftentimes, wealth or poverty is a product of culture. The culture people grow up in determines what they think about money and how they use it. So these are 4 things we all can learn from the Jews. 1. Resilience, the ability to endure and fight through obstacles. 2. Ability to maximize the few opportunities you have instead of complaining about what you lack. 3. Curiosity, the love of knowledge. And 4, lastly, you must learn how to delay gratification, how to say no to temptation, to spend all you earn, to save, and to invest for the future. Which is why I made the video on your screen now. The video on your screen shows you the fundamental reasons why people don't save money, and how you can get yourself to save a lot of money. Click the video on your screen now, and see you inside. Thanks for watching.